here's the cool part. Okay, the cool part is you can basically draw a geometry and then cut some of the pattern out, similar to the way we use cull pattern, but you can cut some of the pattern out based on what that geometry is. So to prepare for that, I'm going to go very intuitively back into Rhino, and we're going to draw a profile within which we're going to either remove or retain that information. So let's go. Yes.
So for grid, you have a plane. So can we make it like a rectangle and add it as a plane, and then we had a kind of like subtract over there to make it like a surface and have a cut?
I don't fully understand the question. I might have to see what you're talking about, but I think what you mean is, can you just make a surface around it and cut the holes out?
Yeah, because I can see the grid has a kind of like plane. So we
Yeah.
can over there we can like make as a plane, and right away it has a kind of like not grid. This is kind of like there's nowhere. So we can add it as a plane and have a kind of like surface. Make a surface, can we?
You can make a surface out of it, yes. And cut the holes out? Is that your question?
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. And that's a very good question because that's what we're getting at, right? So like I said, with this, these are patterns that are mapped over top of a surface that are cut out. That's what we're going to do. So, good question. Okay, so we are going to do an inclusion test, which means we're going to have to use a tool that's called point in curve. So we go to curve analysis, yeah. And we go to test a point or point in curves. Now we're only going to do one. So let's do point in curve, singular. And let's take a look. We'll just put it at the end, right, because that's what we're going to try to do. And let's take a look at what it needs, right? So the description is that it's going to test a point for closed curve containment, or what I like to call inclusion, right? So it's going to test whether or not a point is included within a curve. So we need to create a curve that we're going to test it against. And so what it's asking for is the point for the region inclusion test and the curve that it's going to test it against. And it says boundary region. Something to note about that is that when it says region, it means it has to be closed. So you can't just do something like this, because that's not a closed curve. There is no edge on the side here that defines a region. Does that make sense?
But if it was closed, why would you need to check it?
Sorry, refine the question for me.
It says test a point for a closed curve containment. So it's trying to see if the region is closed, right?
Um,
the point is.
No. So what that's going to test is whether or not a point is within the region.
Oh, okay.
And so the region would have to be closed in order to test that. Otherwise, this point, this circle right here, is it inside or outside? I don't know because the region is not closed. Okay, so what I'd like you to do is just take a moment to use the polyline and draw an interesting and recognizable form. So for me, I'm probably just going to do some kind of L-shape configuration, sort of like this. Yeah, polyline. And you could always turn your edit points on and, you know, fix that up a little bit to stretch it, make it more extreme or something.
You don't want a complicated shape, right?
Not complicated, just something that you're going to be able to recognize. I guess you wouldn't know what you're going to be able to recognize yet, but not complicated, but has some gaps, doesn't fill up the entire volume. And what we're going to do is reference that geometry in. So we go to params, and we go under geometry, and we grab curve. So this curve is going to be set to the curve we just drew. And obviously that curve is going to be plugged into the C input of inCurve. And now the points are going to be a little bit more complicated because the points, we actually have to find the original list of points back here. So that's going to go right there. I'll put it up here. So here's what we get. We get a relationship list that says it's either outside, 1 is coincident, and 2 is inside. And at the bottom we have the list of points. So we have, just if you read the output here, so let's read the description, right? So it says point, region, relationship. So it's giving you a list. Right now I see a bunch of zeros. You might not, but let me get a panel up here so you can really see it all. Okay, so the description says right here, it says point, region, relationship. 0 equals outside. 1 equals coincident. 2 equals inside. So the list here gives me a whole bunch of zeros and a whole bunch of 2s, which means that my circles, or the points that my circles are mapped to, are either inside or outside of the curve that I drew. So I can use this list as a means of removing certain information from the actual pattern. So now my objective here is to go under sets and sequence. Do you have a question?
So it's kind of some of our circle is going to be inside, like inside and outside.
Yes.
So it's kind of like we're looking for no, continue, then I ask because I want to figure out what we need this list.
Okay.
I have a quick question.
Yes.
Why are there only so few points that are within that region? If it's defined point as the center of where, like the centroid of the circle, well, there's a lot of circles in there. Why would it not count?
So without going into counting every single one of them, if you kind of go down my list here, number 23 is where it finally says that it's inside my testing curve, right? My region. So the region you see it's drawn here. If you count all of the circles, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and you go all the way up and all the way down here, what you'll find is that this one right here in the bottom corner, and for the sake of the video, I'll move the mouse to it, right there. That one is index item number 23. And so the difference between that one and the one before it is that that one actually lies inside of my curve. That's why it eliminates those first 24, because they live outside the curve. Is that your question?
I understand that, but I'm just saying it seems as though there's not enough points inside of the object.
It may feel that way. It may be surprising.
Or maybe I just haven't looked at it over.
Yeah, it may be a surprisingly low number of points in some cases.
So you have a kind of like a list of which is inside or which is not inside.
Sorry, repeat the question.
I want to see where it's going to be end, then I
Okay. All right, so this video is getting a little bit longer here, so I'm going to stop this right here, and then we'll move on to to actually excluding the ones outside of the curve.